The Dancing with Wisdom podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Dancing with Wisdom podcast, Series 2, Episode 1. And I'm delighted to be here with Elliott Frisby. It's great to have you as we discuss this topic of wisdom.
I'm literally going to be blown away by this. I'm going to be blown away. So for those who don't know why I'm here instead of Andrew, the way it's come about is that I recorded and produced your audiobook.
That's right, we did the audiobook, yes.
The Dancing with Wisdom podcast. And it really struck me, the word wisdom. And I remember we were sitting down at the dining table having a bite to eat, and we were talking about it, and my mind was getting blown, and so many questions were coming into my head. And I thought, hang on, wisdom is quite an interesting word. And do you know what? Just to get going, if I may, Sunil, I've actually got the Oxford Dictionary definition. It says here, wisdom, the ability to make sensible decisions and give good advice because of the experience and knowledge that you have. Now, that takes up that much space.
It does.
If we had it your way, I think it would be a whole book within itself.
Well, there is actually a whole book that goes with it. I mean, it's a fascinating subject, and I realise I've been fascinated by wisdom all my life because it's much more than what's even in those short words of that dictionary definition, because it really is about how do you make sense of life. And wisdom is about connecting with timeless truths, because, you know, we live in this world that's so, how can I put it, cynical, confusing, complex, chaotic. And it was like that even before COVID.
Yeah. So, and how long would you say that now, in this time of our lives, is the most confusing time within past history, or say recent history?
Well, I think every generation, every age likes to think that it's never been as bad as this. I always think of, Charles Dickens in a famous A Tale of Two Cities. He says it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And in many ways, we've never had it so good. We've got amazing technology that means we can connect with people all over the world. We have, the ability to do so much. If we compared our lives to our grandparents or great-grandparents, they'd say we're living in paradise in comparison with the things we can do. And yet, it's also never been so tough as well.
Well, that's right, because there's so much pressure. I mean, I've got two young children. At the time of recording this, they're 7 and 5. And I'm thinking, wow, the pressure that with the technology and everything moving forward, that they have got to go through as they grow up. I'm worried for them.
Yes.
And so I have to almost be wise enough to make the right decisions to bring them up correctly and give them wisdom. But what is wisdom? So for me, I just want us to go back to a very raw question. Why wisdom? Why did you choose wisdom? What is the fascination with wisdom?
Yes. Well, I think it's something that I've personally been fascinated with all my life. I came as an immigrant child from India at the age of 3, and came into a new country, a new culture, a new environment that I knew nothing about. I didn't know the social cues. I didn't know how to relate to people. I even came only speaking Hindi, so I had to learn English as well. And one of the things that I realized, I was that geeky kid who was always in the corner that everybody overlooked. When they used to try and choose who's going to, which boy was going to be on which side of which football team, I was always the last one that nobody wanted.
Do you know what? It's such a shame, because now when you think of that, you think, well, that's fine. It's a game of football, but at the time, it's a whole lot more than that, isn't it?
Well, I didn't know the social cues. I didn't know how to relate. I lacked wisdom about how to get on, on the school playground.
So straight away, you've associated wisdom with how to get on in the playground.
Well, I wouldn't have been able to say that. But what I realized was I wanted to make sense of life. I wanted to make sense of how do I relate to others? What are the things you say and the things you don't say? How do you become successful? It's all those questions I realized have been nagging at me all of my life. And I've made many mistakes in my life. And so if anything, I've needed it for myself. But I've also, as I've reflected on the world that we live in, this world is, as I said earlier on, getting more confusing and complex. I think it was Socrates who said that Socrates says that the unexamined life is not worth living. And if anything, we are the most over-informed and under-reflective society in the history of the world. Because we have, in the past we'd say, we need more education, or we need more information, we need more data. Now we have oodles of data. And in many ways, particularly in the Western world, we have many very educated, very highly intelligent people. And yet, all that intelligence, all that education isn't helping us to solve many of the intractable problems that we face in individually, as families, as nations, as societies.
Is that because people aren't wise enough to be choosing the correct data and focusing on the right data? Because, like I said, there's so much data out there, so much, especially in the world of technology.
Yes.
You can easily go online and you look for an answer for something. I mean, for goodness sake, don't ever look for a result of a headache or something like that.
Well, if you go to Wikipedia and there are about 500 different choices of breakfast cereal you can have. I mean, we have an explosion of choices. And the thing is, this is not between good and bad. This is between shades of grey. What cereal should I have in the morning for breakfast? What should I watch in the evening? Okay, there's oodles of options for entertainment, and some are wise and some are not so wise. And should I take this job? Should I not take this job? Should I marry this person? Should I not marry this person? Should I date this person? Should I not date that person?
But straight away, with so much choice, I have to bring up the question of, is what's wise for one person different to what's wise for another?
Exactly. Yes.
You see, so there are some TV programs where I'm not going to start putting down some TV programs here, but there are some where I think to myself, why is that even on it? Why is that happening? There is nothing but a horrible feeling from this.
Yes.
There is nothing good from this whatsoever.
Yes.
So, but we are tempted by it. We're being pulled to it.
Yes.
And I think deep down, I always say that your feelings will never lie to you, but your brain can. If you let the brain start going.
Okay.
So I'm thinking to myself, I know that I shouldn't watch that program, or people might know, I shouldn't really watch that. I should go and read a book, but they do.
They do. Well, and I think the key issue there is, and it was what I was saying earlier on, is that we're exploding with choice. Oodles and oodles of choice. Choice about, as you gave that example, is it good for me to spend tonight watching this program? Now, in the past, there was only a limited number of choices. But now we have to decide. And that's why we need wisdom. Thinking, is this actually taking me on a path that I'm going to feel good about tomorrow morning, next week, next month, next year, in the next 10 years? The way that I'm spending my time. In the past, it was easy to be much more reactive. Now we have to think, is this the right direction? And unfortunately, we're not thinking enough. We're not reflecting enough. As I said, we're the most over-informed and under-reflective society in the history of the world.
When you were saying reflective there, you got me thinking of some questions. I actually popped a little marker in your book here, which is, of course, Dancing with Wisdom.
Yes.
And there are three things that come up quite early in the book. There are three questions. You got your book, great.
Yeah.
Hang on, why have you got the hardback copy and I've got the paperback? Something's gone wrong here. That's gorgeous.
Well, you said you wanted to scribble it. This is the only hardcover copy available in the world at the moment, and there's only 3 copies. I gave one to my mum and dad. I had to give them one, and there are 2 other copies, and you got the other one, Elliott. So you can scribble in it and do what you like with it.
Thanks, There you go. You can auction that book off. All right. Question number 1: why do some people grow and develop in their lives in incredible ways?
Yes.
Number 2: how are some people not just productive but also at peace with themselves and others?
Yes.
How do such people think, feel, and behave to flourish so well in their lives? Now, if it's okay with you, I'd like to explore them questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But before we explore those, because obviously it's going to be based around wisdom, I just want to put it out there, and this is a bit of a to-the-point question, because I know we're going to have to go deeper. To you, what is wisdom?
Wow. What is wisdom? Okay, so in a sense, there are so many ways you can go with this, and it's such a rich word. It's so rich that we can only look at one aspect. But what I've said, what I've sort of tried to summarize it as is it's timeless truths that can connect you with the best version of who you are and who you want to be, the ultimate best version, in a sense. And it's making sense of life in the fullest sense of the word. So those 3 questions that you just read out that towards the beginning of the book, and I say there in terms of.
Well, let me answer you. Let me ask you again, and then we'll see where we go with it. So, why do some people grow and develop in their lives in incredible ways?
Well, what I've been struck by is that this issue of choices. Why is it that 2 people can be in very similar circumstances, and one can be doing really well, and another really struggling? Why, for example, do you in life you got people like, I don't know, Steve Jobs, who started Apple and created incredible devices that have just completely revolutionized our world. My favorite person in my favorite book talks about a harvest 10, 20, 100 times what was sown. And why is it some people can do so amazingly well in their lives and other people not? Why is it that some world leaders can have a huge positive impact on their people and other world leaders make their country become terrible? I mean,
and is the answer one of them has wisdom, one of them doesn't?
That starts you on the journey to ask the question.
I see.
It starts the question, why is it that, some people, can do so well? I'm talking about in terms of education, in terms of achievements, in terms of results, and other people who've got the same opportunities don't do so well. That's the first question. But you see, it's such a rich concept. So, but you see, just results is not enough.
See, it's so funny because just asking that question is going to trigger something different from me to somebody else and to yourself. Yeah. So the first thing that popped into my head there was, okay, so people are succeeding, and let's just say they've got wisdom, or they have the ability to search for wisdom within something as they're developing on their path.
Yes.
But surely it goes back a generation or two where the wisdom that's been passed down from previous generations. Does that have a big part?
Well, that's certainly got a role to play, because we stand on the shoulders of giants. So all that we are able to enjoy is because of other people who have made sacrifices on our behalf. So there's certainly an element of that. But what about those people who have those same opportunities, who have the same, as it were, background and ability? Why do some people take opportunities that they've been given and other people don't? Why do some people, for example, decide that they're going to watch Netflix all night, for example, whereas other people think, actually, no, I want to make a difference with my life and I'm going to do something that's more productive? You can be a consumer, you can be a critic, or you can be a creator.
But this is where it gets difficult, Sunil, because some people use something like Netflix to say, switch off.
Yeah, absolutely.
So suddenly they can come back in. So let's just say everyone's got their own way of operating, of living their lives.
Absolutely.
But what we're saying is that everyone needs wisdom within their lives.
Yes.
So how can people in their individual lives start to seek wisdom?
You've got to think, in a sense, is there more to life than what I have? Is there a better way? You said earlier on in our conversation, you were giving an example of TV programs. If I'm going to sit and if I'm going to spend time, the next hour, next 2 hours, the next whole of the evening watching this program, this kind of programs, what is it going to leave me with? Is it going to make me feel better in myself? Is it going to make me a better human being as I relate, in my case, to my wife and kids, at work, with others? Or is it going to lead me into a path of cynicism? Because, we live in a very cynical world, and where we have people who are criticizing and complaining and condemning. Is it going to help me get to where I want to be? So that's in a sense, that's that most fundamental question. Why is it some people can appear to succeed to get where they want and others? But it's more than that. That's why I asked the second question.
Yeah, which I was just actually about to step onto here. So if I just read this once again, how are some people not just productive, but also at peace with themselves and others? I think that is an awesome question.
Yes.
I think that is a great question. And the bit that I love, but also at peace with themselves and others.
Yeah, and it's an important point about that is because our world tends to glorify success. It's about, the best looking, the wealthiest, the one with the most toys, that kind of thing. And we know, and what we're realizing is just having abundance or being successful, having the PhDs and all the sort of external credentials is not enough in terms of what kind of person are you? Are you somebody who's cheerful and enjoys life? Is somebody who other people like to be around? And to be we said earlier, why am I interested in that? Because I've, for a long time, I struggled with depression. I've had burnout. And to be quite honest with you, although I've appeared successful on the outside in terms of I've been a consultant psychiatrist, I've been a doctor, you ask my wife and kids, at times I've been a very grumpy person at home. I've been somebody who's not really been that much fun to be around.
Well, you can ask my wife, if I've ever been grumpy, and she'll say never, I'm sure.
But the point being is, it's this question is, we put so much emphasis on external success, but also what kind of person are you becoming? Who are you? And I'm trying to address that balance, because just external success is not going to bring the satisfaction and significance that we long for.
And I think that raises another big question, which we should approach in a later podcast. That is, you can, on the outside, you can appear extremely successful,
Yes.
and you can have all the money, you can have the house, the cars, everything like that. But with inside, so for example, I can openly say, within my company, I want it to be incredibly successful.
Sure.
I do.
And that's not a bad thing.
No, exactly. I would like the dream house. I would like to drive a nice car and all these things. But doing all of that, I want to give great content. I want to give a great service.
Yes.
It's not about the money. I've kind of found
It's
my
more than
inner
that.
something.
Yes.
So I'm working from the inside out. So I
Wonderful.
like to think that I'm doing that with integrity. I've got friends who appear like they won't have all the riches. They save up really hard to go on holidays. Well, we all do, but they save up really hard to get their holidays. It may be a little bit more difficult for them. And you know what? They're just beautiful. They are the most content people in the world.
Yes.
They've got something going on within.
Yes, I think that's a key thing, is that they're not comparing, that they're not trying to compare themselves to others. They're trying, I said timeless truths that connect us to the best person who we are, of who we are and who we long to be, the best version of ourselves. Because, we're all mixed up in all sorts of ways with so many different sort of conflicting desires and motives and emotions going on. But there is a higher standard. And how can I strive towards that higher standard? What does that mean? So there's the success, there's, and the other thing is that's a really good test is, as I get older, what am I becoming? If you think about like a fine wine gets sweeter with age. Now, most people, dare I say, a lot of people, I don't want to say most, a lot of people as they get older tend to become more grumpy, more cynical, more self-centered, more inward-looking, more talking about their aches and pains, because their past is greater than their present or their future.
But also, they hear people speaking like that.
Yes.
They
that's
hear
right.
people speaking like that.
And that becomes the assumed wisdom of the age.
Yes, exactly. Where you need to have the wisdom to make your own choices. That's what it's saying to me right now.
Yes.
My goodness, this is crazy. So wisdom it just pops in everything that you've discussed so far. Wisdom has popped in many different forms.
That's right, yes.
In many different forms.
Yeah. And that's why, as I was saying earlier on, it's such a rich concept about how do I make sense of life with all its confusion and complexity and chaos. And that's, in a sense, why we've got that third question, is there are people who are very different. I mean, this is the thing that struck me.
Can I just read this question? Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Just so we're on this. So how do such people think, feel, and behave to flourish so well in their lives?
Yes. And there is a remnant. There is people who get more excited about life, who are good fun to be around, who have a passion and purpose for where they're going. And I want to know more about those. I want to learn more about those who are so different to so many who we seem to see who are cynical or very self-centered, or who just haven't got really that much going on, really.
Okay, I'm going to throw a big question here.
Yeah.
So the powers that be in the world.
Right.
You're laughing already. Yeah. The powers that be in the world.
Or who we think are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yes, quite. Are they stopping people? Are they squashing people down to stop being wise to their inner self? Because part of me is thinking right now, if people can be wise enough to say, I'm going to follow what I'm actually feeling within, we would be in a pretty good place. Let's just take a graffiti artist, someone who's out, doing graffiti on the walls and things like that. They could be the most amazing artist in the world. They can be the most amazing artist in the world, but people are seeing it as vandalism.
Yeah.
You see? So people aren't wise to let people breathe.
Yes.
You see? Do you feel that there needs to be more room to breathe
it's certainly
in the world?
complex. And I'd say that in a sense, we by our nature, we're very interested in the externals. Whatever is latest and loudest is what gets given the most attention. And whoever can speak the loudest is the one that's heard. And so we hear things like, 60% or 90% people believe this, or they say this. Whereas, again, I wanted to connect us to timeless truths rather than what is latest and loudest.
That's part of the internet that drives me nuts, the whole review situation, because people very easily complain, moan, do the negative, where if you're just happy with a meal, for example, you just crack on, don't you?
Yes,
if you're unhappy,
right.
You shout about it.
Yes.
So, maybe people could be a little bit more wise about complimenting.
Well, that's right, because we do things instinctively. We don't reflect, we don't step back, we don't think, is it a wise thing for me to speak? Is it a wise thing for me not to speak? In the Old Testament, I've always been fascinated by Solomon. And he's written the book of Proverbs. And in chapter 26, verses 4 and 5, it's fascinating how you've got two statements that appear contradictory back to back. So he says, answer a fool according to his folly, or he'll be wise in his own eyes. And then the very next sentence is, don't answer a fool according to his folly, or you'll become like him. So, Elliott, if you imagine you're in a meeting with somebody and they say something that's outrageous, and their first proverb says, if somebody says that, then you need to correct them there and then. But the very next sentence says, they say something outrageous, you need to keep quiet, because if you get into a conversation or an argument with them about what they've just said, you'll become as foolish as they are. So which do you do?
So I suppose it's about being wise in the moment.
Well, exactly. You see, there's no textbook answer to that, because you need to know the person. You need to know about your relationship with them. You need to know the context that you're in, as well as what the subject matter that they've raised that you think is so outrageous. And so sometimes the best thing to do is to speak out and say, that's not called for, and challenge them. And sometimes it's best to just keep quiet and say nothing whatsoever.
So once again, boils down to wisdom.
It boils down to wisdom, yes.
Well, I should say it boils down to one part of wisdom, because what we're learning here is wisdom is just... It's everything here. So
it covers so much.
If it's okay with you, in another podcast, I'd quite like to discuss religion, wisdom within religion.
Sure.
And how it can benefit you, and perhaps at times be negative, maybe. Even.
And how faith in God and what we understand by religion, how that interacts with this whole issue of wisdom. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge area in itself, because wisdom in itself is much more, as we're going to talk about in future podcasts, is much more than just getting problems solved. Because, we've talked a lot about, I'm in a fix, I don't know how to get this done, and we live in a complex world, and we realize that we haven't got the resources necessarily to sort out the problem. But this is much bigger than that. It ultimately does go to, because if I'm going to make sense of life, I've got to understand what my ultimate meaning and purpose in life is as well.
Okay, well, we will discuss that. Okay, well, let's wrap it up. And we're wrapping up because one thing we promised ourselves, wasn't it? We're going to do it sort of 20, 25-minute podcast, which means that when you're on a coffee break, you can actually get to listen to a full podcast over a cup of coffee. Or if you're on your lunch break, you'll still get a bit of time afterwards. So these are nice sort of bite-sized in podcasts for you to enjoy. And of course, if you've got your friends who will benefit, do tell them about the Dancing with Wisdom, Making Sense of Life podcast. So just to wrap things up, can you just sort of summarize in 60 seconds, why wisdom?
Yeah, so what we try to say is that wisdom is, if you like, the missing ingredient to so much of our lives, because we are drowning in choices and complexity and confusion. And that was even before COVID. And COVID has just taken it up to another level. And that's having an effect on us, I would say, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, in so many ways. And wisdom, we've talked about on this podcast, is timeless truths that can connect us to the best version of who we are and who we long to be. I can't think of anything that could be more exciting and more important than that, really.
I'm super excited because I always knew that I was going to be learning a lot from doing this podcast with you, but I've realized there is so much I don't know, and I'm so looking forward to exploring this and carrying this in my everyday lives. So let's wrap it up. If people would like to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch?
So the website is drsunil.com, and there are resources on wisdom, and obviously with a book that's coming out, Dancing with Wisdom. That's probably the best place, I think, to go to.
And you can get hold of me. That's Elliott with 2 L's and 2 T's. Elliott at monkeynut.uk.com. Of course, you can get us on the Facebook and the Instagram as well. And if you're watching this on YouTube, do leave your comments below. Please make them nice, and
Yes.
and ask your questions. If you've got questions, do let us know. Put your name. It doesn't have to be your real name, but if you want to put your name on there, ask a question. Ask what do you want to discuss? What's the discussion? Let us know. Inspire us, and we can explore that for you, because this podcast is for everyone, isn't it? We're doing this together.
Exactly. And although we're talking about the subject, and I may have written a book on the subject, but I'm struggling to grow in wisdom as well. And in a sense, that's one of the exciting things about wisdom, is that you never outgrow, and we're on this journey with you as well.
Well, let's see if we can do this together. So so tell your friends, leave a nice comment. Really appreciate a 5-star rating, and we will see you at the next Dancing with Wisdom podcast. Thanks, Sunil.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Dancing with Wisdom podcast, presented by Sunil Rahija and Elliott Frisby. For details on the Dancing with Wisdom book and its accompanying workbook, please visit drsunil.com. If you know someone who would enjoy this podcast, then please share it, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, and help it to grow by giving it a nice review. Life's challenges can diminish, define, or develop you. Which one will it be? Make sure you hunger for the wise one. The choice is yours.